I believe all of us understand what is GST audit, but still just a short background. So GST law provides for self-assessment system. And what does it mean? It means that taxpayer has to compute itself his tax liability, pay the same to the department, and report as well the transactions which has been occurred during the period upon which he has computed the liability. So throughout the year, this exercise is carried out, and after a year, the taxpayer is supposed to summarize all this transaction into one single document, which is called GSTR 9 or annual return, wherein he summarizes all the details of outward transactions and relevant inward transactions and other related aspects carried out during the year, file the same to the department, so that department can have a bird's eye view of the records, the transaction which has been taken, which has been occurred during the period. Apart from that, the law also expects certain reliability of these information which has been submitted by the taxpayer. Therefore, they ask the taxpayer to get these documents, these details verified from an independent third party. Either it could be a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. So these independent parties carry out certain audit procedures and build up confidence that the details which has been submitted by the SSC are reliable and presents a true and fair view of the transactions which has been occurred during the period. So therefore, the auditor performs certain audit procedures, build upon this confidence, and if there are any observation or qualification which he feels should be there, if he is not confident for certain aspects, he can draw out those observations as well, and accordingly file a statement which is called GSTR 9C or a reconciliation statement, wherein he provides for the reconciliation between the details available in the books vis-a-vis the details reported into the annual return. So this is GST audit is all about. Okay. So as I mentioned, the auditor files GSTR 9C, that is reconciliation statement, and the underlying hypothesis is the details available into the books, or what we can say audited financial statement, are reconciled with the details reported into the GST returns, so that one can assure, yeah, okay, so 100 rupees turnover was there in the books and 100 rupees turnover was there in the return. If in any case there is a difference, the reason should be reconciled. Okay, so 10 rupees turnover, so suppose 100 rupees turnover was there in books and 120 rupees turnover was there in the returns. So 20 rupees additional turnover is on account of certain GST provisions which are per se is not should not be reported as a turnover into the financial statements, like cross charge of supply of goods or supply of services are there, certain provisions are there. Okay, so this is the overall background. So while performing these audit procedures, as in any other audit, the auditor has to plan out an auditor has to sketch an audit plan and define his scope of audit. So wherein, so accordingly, he can, by his using his professional judgment and experience and expertise, he can devise and he can identify in which area he has to focus more and in which area he can focus less. Taking an example, if in a particular industry tax rates got changed during the year frequently, so the auditor may thrust upon analyzing the domestic transactions more in comparison to the foreign transactions where tax rate is not that much relevant if the LUT has been filed and all the export procedure has been carried out. Because the tax rates got changed during the year multiple times, he should verify whether the correct tax rate was applied during the particular period. If yes, okay. If not, then he has to accordingly raise a question to the management of the company. So I have pointed out few elements which should be there across the audit plans, irrespective of the industry for which you are performing the audit. So since in GST law, basically two elements are there. One is outward supplies, yeah, that is sales, and one is inward supply, that is purchases. So accordingly, these two elements will be covered, and certain few more points are there which may not directly pertaining to outward or inward transactions, but yes, their relevance is there. So coming to outward transactions, First point you have to keep in mind, ask the taxpayer to provide you GSTN wise trial balance and not the state wise trial balance. Why I'm saying so? You would also appreciate that under GST law, even in a single PAN, multiple GSTNs could be there. For each state from where you are making a supply, at least one GSTN should be there. And even in a state, if you feel that one GSTN would not solve your purpose due to your multiple business segments, you are supplying slippers as well as you are supplying cold drinks, and there are different books of accounts. So you can apply for multiple GSTN within a single state also. Under the GST law, the returns, annual return are filed GSTN wise. And you have to reconcile those annual returns with the books. Therefore, you are supposed to have in your hand a trial balance of the particular GSTIN so that you can match, okay, so in this GSTIN, rupees 100 turnover was reported into the books, and accordingly, this 100 rupees is reconciled with the 100 rupees turnover of the GST annual return. If you would not have any trial balance of GSTN level, and you have only consolidated data of whole PAN having suppose 10 GSTN, then you would find it very difficult to have a GSTN level assurance on the turnovers which has been reported. So what you can do in that case, you can ask for a management representation, so that ask the management, please provide me the details of the turnover segregated into the GSTN level, and that total should be matched with the value reported into the audited financial statements, so that you will have a confidence, okay, so for 10 GSTNs were there, 100 rupees turnover each was there, so suppose total 1000 rupees turnover is as per management GSTN level, and that 1000 rupees is getting matched with the audited financial statement, so you can have a confidence on that. Further, in case GSTN wise trial balance not available, then auditor has to be extra cautious while reconciling the values. Okay, so this is the most important thing while reconciling the outward details. Now coming to the next point, cross charge of goods and cross charge of services. So GST law provides that from one GSTIN to another GSTIN, if any supply of goods has taken, I would not say supply, any movement of goods has taken place, and there is no consideration involved, because in a particular company at PAN level, we don't ask our different state branch to give us the money for the goods which we have supplied to them. But as per GST law, these are taxable transactions, and accordingly tax should be paid thereupon. So obviously during the audit, you perform certain audit procedures, you will verify tax rates, place of supply, time of supply, all those things will be done. But apart from that, what has to be taken care of? In case of cross charge of goods, supply of goods between two GSTIN, you would not find these details in the audited financial statements. So what you can do, you can ask for the e-way bill details from your auditee, from your client, and reconcile those e-way bills with the details of cross charge which has been made available to you by your client, so that you can have a confidence. Okay, so suppose 1 lakh rupees of cross charge was reported into the GST return, and e-way bills of 1 lakh rupees are also produced to you. It means these details are reconciled. Okay, but in any case, if you find additional e-way bills which of movement of goods from one GSTN to another GSTN, but those were not reported as a cross charge under the GST returns, then you should ask a question from the client, why these e-way bills were not reported as a supply into the GST returns. There could be a scenario, those were not a supply of goods per se, those are mere movement, because like capital machine in case of construction companies, those capital machine is in form of like trailers or heavy intensive machines. Those are sent to the different project sites in multiple states for the execution of the construction. So those are not supply of goods, those are mere movement of goods, and accordingly these taxes should not be paid upon the same. But yes, you have to reconcile the values. Coming ahead, cross charge of services. So it's a debatable question whether the supply of service by one GSTN to another GSTN is taxable per se or not. In summary, if we say, like from head office, if you supply certain services to your, if you conduct certain activity for your branches, like admin support, finance activities are done, salaries of all employees of a company are calculated at head office only. These sort of things are done. So whether these should be taxed or not. So not going into the legal disputes of this particular aspect, ignoring the head office operations, still there are certain common expenses which are incurred at the head office level, but these are pertaining to all GSTINs. So for example, even the audit service which we are carrying out, this is not for one GSTIN. If it is for one GSTIN, then it's okay, but generally it is not for one GSTIN, it is for all the GSTINs of a company. So it's a common expense. The credit of this expense should be cross-charged to the other GSTIN also, manpower services or legal and professional charges. So these are some few examples which are common to all industries, which head office incurs on behalf of all the GSTN. Now there are two mechanisms through which the value of these expenses should be allocated to the GSTNs. So one is cross charge and second is ISD mechanism. So by either to these mechanism, the value of such amount, these common expenses should be allocated to the different GSTNs of a company. So you can verify that from the expenses ledger which are reflecting into the audited financial statement. You can identify what could be the common expenses like legal charges, professional charges, audit expenses. These are common in nature, and you can ask your client that please verify, please let me know how much amount you have cross-charged or routed through ISD mechanism to your GSTN. I believe I'm clear till this point. Should I move forward? Okay. So next point is regarding the export turnover. So what happens in GST law? We have export of goods and export of services. Especially export of goods is get reconciled with the custom frontier IceGate portal, so there is no much problem in that. But in case of export of services, what happens if your what happens if the taxpayer has not reported this transaction at all, but he has received certain foreign currency for that? So what you can do, apart from the details which has been submitted by the taxpayer to you, you can ask him to provide you the details of foreign currency which he has received during the period, and you should ask him to get it reconciled with the details of export transactions, export turnover which he has reported in the GST return. So if at all there is any gap, see, suppose he has received additional sum of ₹1 lakh US in the books, but he has not reported any export turnover for that. So you can ask a question why this particular amount which you have received has not been reported as a turnover. So you can explain if it was an actual sale or not. Accordingly, you can take a call whether this particular amount which has been received should be reported as an additional turnover, yes or no. Next point is regarding the exempt turnover. It is also really important. Although from the outward side tax implication is not there. So what happens generally, what we have seen, that the taxpayers during the year report certain exempt turnover, but at the end of the year, the exempt turnover which is reflecting into the books of account, that is audited financial statement, is generally huge in comparison to the exempt turnover which has been reported into the GST returns. So accordingly, you can identify what were the additional items which should have been reported as an exempt turnover into the GST law but remain to do so. Like in interest on any investment, generally these kind of values are not reported as an exempt turnover, but you can report the same. And why is it important? Because as and when you will increase the value of exempt turnover, accordingly the reversal of ITC in vis-a-vis this exempt turnover is also get increased, and that legal provision has to be complied also, that as your ITC which is pertaining to the exempt turnover should also get reversed into the final calculation of data, either at annual return level or at GST and INC reconciliation statement level. So that should also be done. Another element in this particular point is the element of non-GST turnover. So please understand, in case of financial statement, you would find certain revenues booked into the books, but these were not reported either as taxable or exempt, and there is no tax implication upon there also. So please note that you should not report these transactions as an exempt turnover per se. You have to first analyze whether at all it is a supply of goods or service, yes or no. If no, but still it is a revenue, you should report as a no-supply turnover or a non-GST supply turnover. I have used these terms as interchanging. Actually, it's a no-supply turnover, but in GST law, in the annual return, at least for 18-19, you can report it as a non-GST turnover as well if you have certain confusion for it. Taking an example, you have the client has received duty drawback of previous years and it has reported it as a revenue into the books of account. So now what will happen? It is not a supply at all and you should not report it as an exempt turnover. Otherwise, what will happen? The corresponding ITC reversal may get inflated unnecessarily. So you should identify what is exempt turnover and what is non-GST turnover, and separate bifurcation, separate reporting of the same should be done for the proper reporting purposes. Now coming to next point, what will happen in GST law? Even if you sell a fixed asset, you are supposed to pay tax on that transaction as well. And it's an exceptional transaction because it is not generally happens. Generally, you would supply your own material. So if a cloth manufacturer would supply, say, cloth of different quantity and different variety. But in case if he sales his fixed asset, he may or he may not advertently and inadvertently report the same into the GST return. So whatever has been reported into the GST return, you can verify it with the books. But what has been left, that also you have to check. So for this particular area, you can build your confidence by looking into the fixed asset registers, identify the disposals which are there in the fixed asset register, and reconcile the same with the sale of fixed asset transactions reported into GST return. So if you feel there is any gap in that, there is a additional disposal in fixed asset register, but those were not reported as sale transactions, then you should ask your client why these were not reported as a sale transaction. It may happen that certain assets got lost or due to any accident or any natural calamity got destroyed at all. So accordingly, disposals would be there in fixed asset register, but since sale was not there or even the scrap was not sold, so sale of fixed asset should not be there. So it is not that every disposal in fixed asset register or every gap between the books through these additional documents and every this additional gap may not always result into a taxable supply and additional tax liability. Ask for the reasons, analyze them with your professional judgment, and accordingly identify over in taxes, yes or no. If yes, reported them accordingly. If no, then get it reconciled and have a proper backup with you and your client as well. So these were the some few important points regarding the outward transactions, which I feel would be relevant across the industries. Now we'll come into for the inward part. So first point for the inward transaction, apart from the basic checks which you will apply, like eligibility conditions, you would check invoices were received, goods or supplies were received, tax has been paid. All these things would be there in your audit plan. The basic hypothesis of reconciliation of inward supply is that the ITC reported into the books should be reconciled with the ITC reported into the GST return, that is annual return GSTR 9. If there is a gap, then reason for that gap should be identified. So it could be, suppose the client has booked into the books a credit, but he has never claimed that credit into the GST return. Advertently or inadvertently, any scenario could be there. So those reasons should be identified. Apart from that, you should also reconcile your ITC with the ITC reported into a tax audit report under the income tax law. Yes, under the income tax law, in the tax audit report, there's a specific column, I think it's column 27, which asks for tax auditor to report the input tax credit claimed by the taxpayer during the period. And that should also be reconciled with the books vis-a-vis return. If there is a gap, ask your client to get it reconciled also. Otherwise, what will happen? Books and return you may reconcile books and return, but there's a separate value in the tax audit return, and the auditor has reported that you have claimed additional credit, but this is not reflecting into the books. Then what will happen? even if the department auditor or you may not find any negative implication upon it, but over the period, what will happen? These kind of gaps may create a distrust whenever an independent third party from the department side come for the audit. So for building that confidence from the different documents, it is very much necessary that you should reconcile your ITC with the tax audit report as well. Coming to the next point, this is regarding the import of service. So ask specifically your client to provide you the details of foreign currency expenditure which has been carried out during the period, and accordingly reconcile the value of expenditure vis-a-vis the import of service which has been reported by the taxpayer into the GST return. If there is a gap, then ask for the reason for the same. There could be a scenario, particular expenditure was made, but it was inadvertently the accountant forget to report the RCM liability on that, but it was a RCA transaction. So you can identify that gap, and accordingly you can correct the actual value of RCM transaction into your returns. Secondly, the import of service should also be reconciled with the details of related party transactions. And what is that? In case of related party transactions, there is a separate annexure into the audited financial statement which provides that all these related party, either domestic or foreign, the audited, the client, the taxpayer has made a supply of goods of this value. He has made an import of service of this value, has made a payment on account of any expenses which has been incurred by the related party outside India. May not be a supply of service, supply of goods, but he has incurred on our behalf. So all these details are there. So what you can do, you can identify from these related party transaction details which are prone to GST law, what expenses which related party has incurred for you should be subjected to RCM under the import of service. You can reconcile the same, and accordingly, if there is a gap, you can fill the same also. I will give you a practical example what has happened. There's a taxpayer and there's a related party, foreign related party of the taxpayer. So he has made a supply of goods and he has received supply of services from that. He has made a supply of service and received a supply of service also. So what has happened? I have made a debtor of same party and I have made a creditor of same party. And at the books level, at the account ledger level, these two transactions get knocked off. So there was neither a reporting of supply of service and there was neither a reporting of import of service. But these details get we find out these details through the ledger of the related party. It means there could be a scenario that the transaction which are reported as import of service into the GST return may not provide you the actual picture. So accordingly, you should get it verified with the related party transactions so that you can have a better confidence on these details also, foreign currency expenditure and related party transactions. Now coming to the next point for the RCM only. So what is that? For identification of whether the RCM which has been reported as under the GST returns is accurate, yes or no, you can make another reconciliation with the ledgers of the ledgers which you feel may be prone to the RCM. So in the audited financial statement, you would find different groups of expenses. You can identify, like if there is an expense of logistics, or there is an expense of conveyance, transport. You may have a understanding that these ledgers may contain certain transactions having the RCM implication, because in certain cases supply of GTA service is subjected to the RCM. We are not going to the legalities when these are put onto RCM and when are not, but you can identify these ledgers. Another example could be legal and professional charges. So suppose you have your client has reported a value of 1 lakh rupees as a legal expense on which he was supposed to pay tax, and he has paid tax upon it. But the value of legal and professional charges gives you a value of 10 lakh rupees. So that has to be reconciled at the balance sheet level also. It may happen that out of those 10 lakh, only 1 lakh was prone to RCM and other 9 lakh was related to other professional charges of auditor expenses or any other professional services which he has taken. Company secretaries transactions could be there, which are not prone to RCM. But yes, these values should be reconciled at balance sheet level with your GST return. so that a holistic view, a positive holistic view can be gathered as and when any third party will get these things audited. Next point is GSTI two-way reconciliation. Although for 18-19 it may be a debatable question, because I think it was October 18 onwards it get mandated that credit should be reflected into the GSTI two-way return. Otherwise you won't be available to take the credit. If you want to take the credit, there's a cap of 10%, 20%, all those things are there. But still, for the whole GST audit, it is really necessary that any credit which you have booked in your books, but it is not reflected into the GSTI 2A, in those cases proper documentation should be there, and proper maintenance record should be there, so that as and when somebody asks a question, the taxpayer and the auditor have a ready answer that yes, these supplies has been procured by me, I have a valid tax invoice for the same, and I have also a confirmation from the vendor that he has paid that tax into GST 3B. Due to one reason or another, these could not be reflected into the GSTR 1, and accordingly these could not be reflected into my GST 2A. But yes, these are the genuine transactions. And specifically for the high value transaction, it is really important that you should get a comfort on these transactions from your client, that yes, although not appearing in 2A, but he has a valid tax invoice for the same. And if you feel more, if you want to feel more, have a more confidence, ask the vendors to give them a certificate for the same. So this is regarding the inward part, which I feel would be relevant and would be necessary, apart from the general audit procedures which we carry out throughout our audit, which are relevant for the reconciliation purposes. Coming to the few more important points which may not be related directly to outward or inward. In the GST and the annual return, apart from output and input, details of refund are also reported, and those details should also be verified by the auditor. So what you can do in the case of refund, yes, you can have a better confidence because the department would also have gone through those working papers of the refund, and accordingly would have taken a assurance that okay, this refund is genuine. Accordingly, he would have, the department accordingly have taken a call to refund that amount or reject that amount. But as an auditor, you should also get an assurance that all the refunds which has been filed by the taxpayer have a valid, adequate working paper trail for those refunds. All the invoices are there, all the returns are there, taxes has been paid upon it, any undue advantage has not been taken. So these kind of assurance should be there while you carry out an assignment wherein the client has made a refund. It could be export of goods, export of service, made with payment, without payment, or any other specific refund could be there. But the working papers should be there, and you should take a confidence upon that as well. Next point is regarding the penalties and tax disputes. So what are these? In case of a taxpayer, it may happen that during a period, certain tax disputes would have arisen, and he has paid certain penalties upon it. So suppose due to any clerical mistake in e-way bill, the consignment was impounded by the authorities, and accordingly he has to pay a tax and penalty upon it. So these details should be verified by you, that yes, okay, the notice provides for this particular amount of tax, and accordingly he has paid that to the department. These amounts, apart from the GST records which are available in your hand, should also get reconciled with the tax audit report. In case of tax audit report under the income tax law, all the penalties, all the taxes which has been paid due to any tax dispute are also get reflected in the tax audit report. You should reconcile the amounts which has been deposited on account of these disputes by your client in the GST return vis-a-vis the tax audit report. Okay, so this is one element. This is one aspect of tax disputes. Another aspect is in the audited financial statements, whatever case laws or whatever disputes are there for a particular tax, for a particular kind, these are reported into audited financial statements as well. you can have a look upon it and accordingly identify whether these tax disputes, although of previous tax regimes or previous tax periods, are relevant in the current tax period also, yes or no. So suppose there is a classification issue which is going on since the excise regime of your client, and the department says that rate of tax should be 28%, but your client has paid tax on 18%. And this dispute is, although is not finalized yet, settled yet, but it is relevant for you for your current tax period also. And accordingly, you can have a look and you can accordingly thoroughly analyze that particular area of classification, and accordingly have your confidence, have your judgment also, that whether the tax rate is 28% or 18%. Whatever the case may be, you should have built your confidence. Okay, the rate of tax from your point of view, if you say that 28%, accordingly you can discuss with your client your point of view. And if you feel that it is a riskier situation, you can accordingly put an observation into your reconciliation GST and INC statement that yes, from my point of view, the rate of tax is 28%, but yes, the client is in dispute with the tax department and matter is going on. Therefore, he has paid the taxes on the 18% only. So these things would get triggered in your mind only and only when you go for the different documents which are there apart from the GST report which are made available to you. Now, second thing is that is really important regarding the penalties. So, in taking the example of Waybill only. So earlier, what has happened? Now it is on the portal, I think also. But earlier, what has happened? Whenever these consignments are get impounded by the authority, they ask you to pay the taxes. So what you do, you deposit certain amount electronic cash ledger, and you create a challan and you provide the copy of that challan to the tax officer, and accordingly he releases the goods. But it may also happen that that amount which has been deposited into the electronic cash ledger may get utilized during the course of time into the regular GSTR 3B returns for discharging of liability. So what will happen? You have paid a amount, you have deposited an amount of 1 lakh rupees into the electronic cash ledger. You have submitted to the tax officer that yes, I have deposited this amount, please release my goods. And now you have used that 1 lakh rupees for your own convenience for discharging your regular tax liabilities, which is not allowed per se into the law. So therefore, if such kind of situation is there, then specifically raise a remark into your report and ask your client, specifically take his explanation then why this particular activity has been done. So these things should be taken care of. Next point is regarding documentation. So GST law expects an auditor to comment not only upon the details of transactions or taxes which has been paid by the taxpayer, it also requires the auditor to provide an assurance whether the documentation which is required under the GST law has been adequately maintained by the taxpayer, yes or no. So what will happen? You will ask for the samples of invoices, samples of bill of supply, delivery challans, e-way bills, all those details you will find. You will ask for your client to provide you so that you can have an assurance on that. Specifically, these three elements should also be asked for. Receipt voucher, that is a document which is given to the debtors when you receive advances from them. Payment voucher, when you payment voucher which is raised when any payment is made to an unregistered person for which you RCM transaction is leviable. So in case of RCM transaction, whenever you make a payment to your vendor, you create a payment voucher. Simultaneously, in the same scenario, from whenever you receive an RCM seller from an unregistered vendor, you also raise a self invoice. So these three details should also be there in your documentation so that you can have an assurance that yes, as per the GST law, adequate documents has been maintained by your client. And the last point in this whole discussion is, which is you can say is most relevant, identify or have an understanding on the industry-wise issues. So there could be an issue into the shoe manufacturing company, but that may not be relevant for a you can say a cloth manufacturing industry. So rate of tax disputes or rate of tax could be more in shoe making, but there is no much dispute of tax in cloth making. So industry-wise issues could be there, and you should understand those industry-wise issues and accordingly specifically ask your client that what is his stand on these issues, so that you can have accordingly, if you have any difference of opinion with your client, so accordingly you can take a professional judgment what should be the next course of action for these particular aspects. And secondly, you should always go for the remarks or the observations which are there into the audited financial statements or the other audit reports made available to you by your client. Either could be a tax audit report or a cost audit report or your audited financials, or any, if any specific audit is there applicable to your client, ask for those reports as well. If possible, ask them to give you the internal audit report. So because these auditors would have carried out their audit procedures as well, and accordingly with the help of their efforts, you can identify if there is any triggering or gray area or highlighting area where you would like to give more thrust for carrying out a safe and reliable GST audit. So these are the points which I felt from my experience would be relevant for carrying out the GST audit as a whole. Apart from these points, yes, general audit plan should be there and scope of audit should be defined by your own professional judgment and experience, that in which area you would like to trust more and which you would trust less. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation, my part, and I would like to thank you, iTalks team, specifically Himanshu, for giving me this opportunity so that I have presented my points, my knowledge with all of you. Thank you.